You're listening to Snippets from the Summit with your host, Scot McKay.
All right, gentlemen, this is your main man, Scot McKay, coming at you again with another Snippet from the Summit as part of the Mountaintop Podcast. Gentlemen, today, as a New Year's present to you going into 2026, I am going to show you a foolproof way to make sure you're not settling for the wrong woman in your life. We've talked about this before. The only thing worse than settling for the wrong woman in your life is that feeling of having been settled for that the woman in your life is going to feel if she knows you don't really want her as much as you would want another woman. If your nose is pressed to the glass outside, looking at the greener pastures when she's right there in front of you. If you just feel like, you know what, she would have been better off being some other guy's girlfriend and she starts feeling the same, well, then you're in a bad situation. And that leads to divorce court and basically your own personal and financial ruin, as well as hers, frankly. God forbid there be any children in the mix. So we want to avoid that. Well, here's the best way to avoid that. And I've never heard any other dating or relationship coach talk about this ever before. So here it goes. The woman who is right for you will be a culmination of all your favorite girlfriends. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, first of all, if you're not dating any women and you're waiting for women to come to you and you're not doing the self-work to have the confidence to ask women out, fully expecting they'll say yes to you, if you're not a man who is a big four man yet and women are not saying yes to you, well then call me and let's do some coaching to get you to that point. But here's what happens when you start dating a good number of women. I'm not saying you have to be Casanova. I'm not saying you have to go out with 20 women a week or have a harem or anything like that. But let's say over the course of the next year and a half, you're a man who's looking for a wife in the future. You'd like to have a long-term relationship, have a son and a daughter, leave a legacy, live that dream. Then maybe you'd be dating one or two women a week. If that sounds like a lot, it's not once you're a big four man with a lot of confidence. And then over the course of the next year and a half, there'll be some women you like and some women you don't over the course of that time. But let's say overall you end up going out with 25, 30 women over the next year and a half. That doesn't sound too over the top impossible to pull off, right? Well, here's what you will find out as you date those women, whether it's for one date or whether you date them for a while, or even if you're exclusive with one or two or three of them over the course of a month or two, until you realize, it's not going to work. What you're going to find out, first of all, is you're going to really start sorting out what it is you really like about certain women, what it is you want out of a woman in your dating relationship, what you want her to be like, what you want her to look like, what you want her to act like, and what your preferences are compared to what you thought you wanted, right? I used to think I wanted a woman who wasn't a shrinking violet, that she would kind of argue back with me and not be so easygoing, right? But what I realized was I didn't want a contentious woman. I wanted a woman who I could talk to and have a real conversation with who wouldn't be boring. That's what I found out. Similarly, I thought I liked women who looked and acted a certain way, but then I discovered there were women out there who would break that mold. They weren't that kind of woman, but because I never had an example of a woman like that, I wasn't really ready for her when she arrived. Great example. I grew up in Baltimore, Maryland, and this may be hard for some people to believe, but when I lived in Baltimore, where I lived, there weren't any Latinas at all. So I had an image of the kind of woman I liked and who might be my girlfriend. As soon as I moved to Yuma, Arizona, my world was opened up to Latinas, and I went, boy, do I like Latinas. Who knew? That's exactly what I'm talking about. As you date more women, you start realizing what your likes, wants, and preferences are, and they may be different than your preconceived notions. And you know what? Women are all individuals, and they may surprise you in how they look, act, and think, ways that attract you that you never envisioned before or indeed had an example of. Similarly, women can bring habits, traits, individual idiosyncrasies, and even skills to the table you never imagined were out there, okay? This is how I infamously figured out I really like women who are tomboys, and that I really believe that military women can make great girlfriends. Even though a lot of guys have preconceived notions to the contrary, A lot of those women are very feminine. They just happen to like men and like doing what guys do, and they end up being your ride or die chick. They're often the same women who are not very easily offended at all, right? On the other hand, I used to think, because I guess I was trained by society, that I really need an independent woman who will do her own thing. Actually, I like a woman who's a little bit dependent on me and in a way even a little bit needy. I think that's actually kind of nice. I don't want her to be super needy. I don't want her to be super dependent. I don't want her to completely lack direction or self-esteem. But I think the pendulum isn't quite as far to one side versus the other as I always thought it was. And indeed, my wife is an independent woman who can think for herself, but, she still has times where she needs me and I still feel needed by her. And I think that's pretty nice. Now, when it comes down to individual idiosyncrasies, it can get very, very specific. Over the years, I've found that I like women who laugh a lot. I like women who giggle. They don't bother me. A lot of guys are very annoyed by that. I love it. I also am a voice guy. Some guys are tits guys. Some guys are ass guys. I'm not saying I'm neither one of those, but one thing I definitely am all about is a woman's voice. I need a woman who has a mellifluous voice, and it took me probably years of dating before I realized there was a common denominator with the women I really enjoyed the company of, and that was I could listen to them read the phone book, and they were an easy audience, and they laughed a lot. Hey, that's what I like, okay? So I knew it, so I was able to recognize it better. Now, over time, and by that I don't necessarily mean years or decades, maybe months, okay? Something apparently miraculous happens in your dating life. You start attracting women who bring many of the aspects you've favored most all in one package. Now, full disclosure, it's not really a miracle. At least not as much as you're going to think it is when you start watching it happen before your very eyes. What you're actually seeing in action is you recognizing, then choosing the women you like, even at those subtle levels, and she feels chosen in return. That, gentlemen, is how you know you're not settling. And when I say there can be subtleties to what you've really appreciated about your previous girlfriends and how you start seeing that reoccur in more women later on, I'll tell you what, my favorite little girlfriend in college and my wife have the same exact hiccup. It's crazy. It sounds to me like a baby bird falling out of a tree or something. I'm not even going to imitate it for you. But those two women are the only two women I've ever met who have that hiccup, and I adored them both. That's how subtle it can be. Guys, there will be many women who come along who seem like the culmination of all your favorite girlfriends in different ways. When you start seeing that pattern, you know you're not settling anymore in general. Then what you do from there is you keep on with that pattern until you find the woman who absolutely is the queen of all women, who are the culmination of all your previous girlfriends. And that's the woman you'll never get sick of. That's the woman you'll always be proud of. That's the woman you'll tie the knot with and never look back. And she'll love you and appreciate you even more because she will always feel chosen and never settled for. Want to talk about this or anything else? Scot at mountaintoppodcast.com. Happy New Year and be good out there.
As always, visit mountaintoppodcast.com for more.